welcome to our Let's Talk About It series webinars that we've been running since last year, 2025. Welcome from Leonora as well. If you wave, then people can see my other co-chair, Methodist Women in Britain. There she is. She's muted, she's waving. And they're meeting in church. And good evening to everybody. I hope you're all warm, whether you're joining us from a quiet place or taking a breather from a busy January. As Alison had mentioned, we are glad that you've made it and you can take a seat with us tonight. My name is Olive with Methodist Women in Britain, and it is our joy to come and let's talk about it. This series was launched based on topics that we don't normally talk about in church. And these are topics that we sort of, when we go and feed our souls, we forget that there's that reality that we should bring in as well to talk about and fellowship amongst friends and family that we've made within the church family. So if you've been following us, in September when we started, we tackled the hot with all pun intended, topic of menopause. In October, we then explored intimacy, linking it to the Songs of Songs and more. And then in November, we broke silence on FGM, female genital mutilation, which was hosted with us by Forward UK. So we've had a lot of conversations, and all of those that we've had before can be found on our YouTube page. Tonight, we're moving into a theme, I think, that is at the heart for everybody, and especially this time of year where we've looked back at what happened last year and we're looking back at what we want to do next year, and then we're in a frenzy of whether we are actually doing what we should be doing. We're following our goals that we set in 2019 and are still not ticked, and it puts us in a situation, in a panic, issues to do with mental health, and we're wanting to put our minds at ease. We're wonderful at talking about our spirituality, but we're not very good at taking time to take care of ourselves. So the important question today is, how are you really doing, sister? And I think that is something that will be unpacked by our speaker today, and I'll speak more about her. But before we go through, I'm just going to give you a bit of housekeeping. We do record our sessions so that we can post them again on our YouTube and for our records. We will have a session with Last, who will unpack mental health for us for 30 minutes in the first part, and then we'll have a questions and answer session. The first part is definitely recorded. In the second part, if you wish for your participation or your question or your response not to be recorded, please say so. Matt, who is hosting our webinar, will gladly edit it out so that when the final product is publicized, your comment will not be included. So you might hear bits of noise where Matt is pausing recording, or he will record you out. So please state if you want to be taken out. Most importantly, if you don't want your face to show, please take your camera off. But I'm hoping we'll enjoy our evening. So I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Last Mafuba, who's a childhood friend of mine, but is now my therapist. She has been, but she's now qualified to deal with all my problems. So Dr. Last Mafuba holds a PhD in social science and social policy, a master's in international development law and human rights, and she's the founder and CEO of Inini Initiative, and serves as the independent chairperson for the Coventry and Warwickshire Mental Health Alliance. Last is a specialist with a heart for migration change, and she's going to speak to us on for mental health, but also on the work she does within Migration Change. Welcome, Lust.
Thank you, Ms. Rue. Thank you. I'm glad to be here and obviously quite passionate about this topic. So I'm happy to be sharing with you today. Do you want me to continue with the session or? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ru. And thank you everyone for joining in this evening. So tonight we are going to talk about mental health. I'm going to put my focus on listening, compassionate listening. And also I'm going to focus on migration, how migration affects our mental health and how compassionate listening helps people to overcome the challenges of mental ill health. A bit of context before I dive into the session. I am a former refugee and I had a mental breakdown when I was on the asylum system. And it was then when I realized that I needed to come back and work with migrants because I was living in a hostel in Liverpool. From Liverpool, I was sent to Birmingham to another hostel, and I then ended up in Coventry, where I am now. And during the course of my stays in hostel, because I was living with fellow migrants, I realized that almost everyone who was in there was experiencing some form of mental ill health. And to be honest, I'm yet to see anyone who goes through that process and come up with just their mental health intact. Currently, I run an organization called ININI. And what ININI does is we support or we empower migrant communities to overcome the challenges of integration because we understand that it is the challenges of integration, the challenges of being on the asylum system that gives people a mental health problem. I'll give you a few statistics on mental health not in Britain, but in the UK. So ethnic minority communities who are now what we call global majority communities are overrepresented in experiencing mental illness and also in not accessing mental health services. And the lead on the team are Black populations, particularly those of sub-Saharan African origin. They are 4 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act. They are 10 times more likely to be released on a community treatment order. And when in hospital, they get higher doses of medication. They stay in detention for longer. And all the bad things around mental health happens within this group. And this is just for context, so you would understand why I am zoning in on compassionate listening, which is where ININI comes in, because we have realized that if the listening was happening within the community, individuals do not need to be detained. They end up being detained because there is no listening in the community. If we look at most migrants, the countries where they are coming from, their home countries, they live as a collective. But when they get to this country have got a culture where they live an individualistic sort of life. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that now there is then this dissonance where you are used to living within a community where you share everything, where even when we look at the mental health definition, the definition, the World Health Organization definition means something totally different to the definition that is given to mental health among most migrant communities. So why do migrants end up with mental health issues? First, migration is more about you're leaving your country. It could be voluntarily, it could be you're forced to because of the situation in your country. Just that you end up, there's that trauma of loss, grief. It could be loss of family, it could be loss of your properties. You lose everything that you know, and mostly particularly for those that are forced to leave, they rarely travel as a family or as a couple or with friends. They travel on their own. We joke and say within or we cross the 7 seas. So when we are talking about someone when we want to show that they do have the experience of migration, we just call it, oh, you know the 7 seas. So it's that insecurity where you're coming into a new country, you don't know anyone. Sometimes you don't speak the language. You don't know where to go for help. You end up now with an illness. So there's long-term stress. There's the not knowing when your decision is going to be made. I work with people now who've been waiting for the past 5 years. I also work with people who've been in this country for 25 years, who have submitted, who have resubmitted, come back, collected more evidence, resubmitted. All that takes a toll on people's mental health. So then there's stress-related psychosomatic symptoms that you end up with. There's despair, there's anxiety. And then people can go and seek help. In my PhD, I examined why the access to mental health services. Why is it that migrant communities, my focus was more on Black Sub-Saharan African communities because they are the ones who are right at the top of experiencing mental illness and also of not accessing mental health services. So when I was having conversations with them to get to understand why you are experiencing mental illness, and like there are organizations like ININI, there are other voluntary organizations, there are churches, there are groups that consistently talk about mental health and how you can get support. Why is it then that you don't sign up for support? This is when it then came to light that the mental health definition that I mentioned, where the definition for mental health here is more individualistic. The definition the migrants ascribe to is more about community. So when we even look at the assessment tools that are used before when somebody goes in, being assessed for something like depression, most of the time it's more like on a scale of 0 to 10, how many times can you say you were able to make a decision for yourself? And people would say probably 0. Why? Because the Home Office makes the decisions for them. They don't get to make decisions. And they always rank lowly because most of the staff, they don't have not capacity. They don't have the power to do, no matter how much they want to do, they can't do it because the system does not allow it to happen that way. Right? So you will find that most people then, they tend to the church. Most of migrants tend to the church. But then when we come to church, there also is this not misunderstanding, but I think also there is that not understanding that when we are in church, when you've got faith, you need to believe that you've got faith, God will do this for me. And so people then tend to lean on their faith and not seek help. Not saying that having faith is bad, but you can also have faith to know that I can seek help. And also for the church to be able to listen with compassion. Right? When somebody comes into this church, I hear sometimes people are told they feel that it's being said that you are weak. When you are praying, when you have faith, you and you are not healing, then you're not healing means that you are weak. So what then tends to happen is people stop even going to church. People stop seeking help, going to their GP, because when they go to their GP, the first thing the GP gives them is the antidepressants or the sleeping tablet. Most of them cannot sleep. And also, by not sleeping, most of them, when we talk about mental health, like I mentioned earlier, they don't understand that what is mental health, what is mental illness. Sometimes they think when we say mental health, we are talking about psychosis and not depression and not stress, not anxiety. So particularly within Inini, we don't even talk about mental health. We talk about lack of sleep. Have you been trying to sleep? Are you stressed about your home office issue? Are you stressed about this and that? And then they understand. This is when you can say to them, oh, okay, this is what we mean when we say mental health. We are talking about these issues. So because we do offer a counseling therapy, one-to-one counseling therapy. And at first, no one was signing up for counseling therapy because we also work with newly arrived migrants in hotels. So if you just go there and say, we are offering one-to-one counseling, no one turns up because they don't understand that I don't have psychosis. Why should I be going for mental health treatment? So you need to explain. But what we have found out to work well are the peer support groups that we run. We run peer support groups across Coventry and Warwickshire, and they have proven to be quite popular. We actually had individuals who were always in and out of mental institutions who have really stopped being detained because of being part of the peer support groups. Because within the peer support groups, we meet on a weekly basis. And what happens within the peer support groups is we talk about anything and everything. We talk about all the challenges that people face, the discrimination. We talk about the racism. We talk about all the things that you can think of that is taboo in most places. And the way it works is when we listen, we don't judge. But probably we signpost people. For some, they are homeless. For some, facing discrimination, then we set up trainings where we teach people how to deal with discrimination. How do you deal with it? Because sometimes people, I'll give you an example. There's a locality, I'm not going to say a name, there's a locality that is very hostile to migrants, quite hostile. We had someone who was, they were just walking down the street to get to the shared accommodation where they live. They were just grabbed as soon as they got to the door. I think someone was following them, on these scooters, following them to see where they were going. And they had identified to know that this house houses asylum seekers. They beat him up and left him with broken hands and legs. That's how bad the situation is in some areas. So then when stuff like that is happening in a locality, people are scared. People don't want to speak. It doesn't matter how nice or how kind you are. They don't trust anyone. That's how bad it is. So when we talk to them, when somebody talks to them with compassion, and when somebody understands the challenges that are faced by migrants, and when they communicate with them and their rapport shows that they just are able to listen, sometimes it's not easy to understand something that you've never been through. You may think that you understand, but half the time you don't. You don't. I remember vividly one of the quotes that I put down in my thesis where I was asking somebody about therapy to say, what do you think about accessing one-to-one therapy so that you can be helped? And she said to me, I've been on that for a very, very long time. All what I want is freedom. Or even if anyone had to go what I'm going through now, they will still end up the way I am right now. It doesn't help me to go and seek help in hospital or to a GP because they don't even understand what I'm talking about. And that's the honest truth. The GPs don't understand the challenges faced by migrants. They don't, which is why they just end up, if somebody walks in, they just give them the sleeping tablet, the antidepressants. That's what's done most of the time. Please let me know when you think I've overrun my time. Okay, that's fine. So also there is this uncertainty and isolation. When people are lonely, people are being misunderstood, and they don't know where to go. Particularly for newly arrived migrants, they really do struggle and want, because they look at the mosque and the churches as the most places they could go. They trust those more than any other services. So, which I think is why I feel, I know most people on this call are from a church background. So I am just saying this, where when you see people from a migrant background coming to the church, you need to listen to them with compassion. But also there are certain questions that you cannot ask. I know there are questions that are asked, particularly the question, why did you come? That people that, why did you leave your country? Why did you have to come here? Who did you come with? Those questions are a no to ask. Just look at them like they are human beings. They are just people who've come into church, and their private business is their private business, because they don't trust anyone with their stories until they get to know you intimately. Right? But the one thing that I need to emphasize is talking within the church, where if people are willing to listen, it really relieves them of their anxiety and stress so much that there will be no need for them to be detained in hospital. Like I mentioned about the assessment tools, some of the time they get detained, not because they have a mental illness, but because the assessment has shown that they have a mental illness that's way, way beyond. This is also why they end up being given huge doses of medication that they do not need. And sometimes they don't need that medication at all, but then that the side effects of that medication leaves them with a mental illness that they didn't have in the first place. In my research, I had 3 people mention that when they were trying to get therapy, after the assessment, the therapists were saying, I've never had to see someone who struggles like you. I don't think I can help you. But it's not that, it's simply because the assessment tool was not made for them. It's trying to measure something. It's trying to use a measurement where it doesn't fit. You're using the wrong measurement on someone. And obviously the answer, the response is going to be negative. And that actually distorts everything. So the power of listening is quite important. Being present without fixing. Don't try and fix them. Just be present. Listen without rushing. And please believe people's stories. Don't go away and say, oh, I don't really think what they were saying. Do you think it happened? Believe people's stories. And be consistent. Yeah. So what doesn't help is telling individuals that at least you are now in a safer place. The honest truth is, I don't know whether to say Britain is safe for migrants, but it's not that safe. And I've told you of a guy who was left with broken legs and arms. And sometimes it's not being beaten up as such, but you're telling somebody who is waiting for a decision from the Home Office. Anyone who has been through the asylum process particularly will tell you that whatever correspondence you have from the Home Office, they will mention that you are a person who is liable for detention and deportation. And that statement on its own is what gives people mental health challenges. You are never sure. You don't know whether you're going to be sent back or not. So if you're telling me I'm now in a safe country, how safe am I when I could be sent home tomorrow? That's the thing. So don't say those words. Or don't say God has a plan. I know we love saying that as Christians, God has a plan. Or God would not put you in this if he was not going to support you, to see you through. To someone who is in that situation, try and say something else, I'm sorry. Or don't give quick solutions. So you don't have to be an expert. Being human is enough. Just be human. Just be human. And don't try and, yeah, I've said it, don't be an expert. Don't try and be an expert. And I think from here, we could go into the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Last. Thank you for your background, from the eye of an immigrant and touching on mental health, and what I've picked up on this, which would resonate even from those who are not necessarily from the group, from a migrant group, is mental health affects an individual in the way it affects that individual, if that makes sense. So there is no point where we are going to say this group is affected more or this person is affected more. It's an experience, an individual experience. Lust has given us a perspective from a migrant experience. I've picked up the points that could work on a vast majority. I think the one thing is listening and not judging. In an environment where you may not necessarily have moved from another country, your circumstances are different. In this particular case, migrants are feeling the stress from migration. Let's take, for example, somebody who is feeling the pressure from something else. The triggers are different. You don't feel yourself. You don't know that you are depressed. And I think that is one thing that was highlighted by Las. You know you are going through things that are not what your standard way of life is, what your feeling is. How, when looking at it from the perspective of we know somebody who is experiencing that, or we are experiencing that. So what Lust has given us is that perspective of how we can receive people and acknowledge and identify somebody who is going through a stressful period, and therefore can then be said somebody who has ill health, mental ill health. And I think I noted that we talk about mental health as the illness, but there's mental ill health where there's actually ill health that affects your mental. The advice here was to listen without judging. It's very easy to have solutions in whatever perspective, whatever solutions that we have, because we're not sitting in their shoes. The church is very good, and I think because these are topics that we normally talk about outside the church, we don't talk about them in church. When we come out, the brother, sister, we tend to quote, to take scriptures and sort of sugarcoat what the person is feeling with a scripture. And I think what Lester said to us is, it's not that scripture does not help, but I think we need to listen with compassion and figure out whether what you're feeding the person at that point is the person is in a situation or position where they can consume what you're feeding them. So from my understanding from all of this is, in whatever circumstances, in receiving people, the first point is to listen. The most important point is to listen. And without diluting, I think what we've learned from Lust, we'd like to open this for questions. And these can be questions with full content on what Lust has provided, or any other questions to do with mental health. Feel free to ask. Like we mentioned in the beginning, we are recording the session, but if you feel that your contribution is something that you would not like to be recorded, please state so before you say your comment or your question, and then we will either edit it out or we will stop recording. Please just show by either electronic hand. I'm terrible at electronic, so I tend to just wave at the screen. While we're waiting for any questions to come, Alison?
I would like to thank Lust for her input and for introducing this topic so knowledgeably. I would agree very much that listening without judging, listening with compassion and empathy is important. I made a note. I wrote down the word stigma when you started saying that some migrant people coming into a church, they would be quite reluctant or nervous of sharing their inner feelings, not sure whether they would get a compassionate ear. But I wonder also what part you feel stigma plays. I think whatever your background, in my experience, particularly in church, to admit that you have a mental health problem can cause this judgment response. And I wrote down that word stigma because I feel there is a fear of being stigmatized. Well, you can't be a proper Christian if you're going through such difficulties. What do you say to that?
That's a very interesting question. And I think this is what I was trying to explain when I was saying that some churches or some individuals from the church, they would look at you and think, if you have faith, you don't have to be going through problems because that's a weakness, or that shows a lack of faith. And because of that, that's stigmatizing as well. I don't want to be viewed as lacking in faith. I also don't want to be viewed as having a mental illness because of the way mental illness has been stigmatized over the years, right? But what I have realized through experience, if we talk about depression, migrants are more open to talking about depression because they don't look at it as a mental illness, unless it is psychosis. So, because they say the word loosely, oh, I'm so depressed. Oh, this is depressing me. They don't understand that what depression is deep. And for most that I see within our services, they will tell you that in my country, I've never seen anyone who is depressed. Depression is one thing that I only learned in this country. So there's nothing like depression. Obviously there is, but it's got another name. More like I'm worried. This is worrying me. And when they say, oh, I'm so depressed, it's just loosely. It's not the clinical depression that they are talking about. But the stigma comes when it is psychosis. Oh, there's a big stigma around psychosis. And also when it comes to the church, it's more like, if I go to the church and say I am struggling with my mental health today, and they pray for me, they pray with me, they remember me in their prayers at home, and you come again next month, you can't keep saying, oh, I'm struggling with my mental health, because now they feel like, where is your faith? And also there's this term, just surrender it all. Why are you carrying it? It's too heavy for you. Just surrender it all to God. And it's not like I just, please take all these challenges from me. And then God just, that same day and next week I'm in church and I'm singing and praising God. And it doesn't happen like that. So yes, you are right. Stigma plays a big role as well. And because of stigma, some people don't even come out and their mental health deteriorate, which is how they end up in detention. Yeah. I don't know if you're answered.
Thank you, Last. I've got Kirsty waiting in the wings.
Hello, that was really interesting. Thank you. I'm trying to look to do a raising awareness evening because I support asylum seekers and refugees in our area through the Sanctuary Group. And one thing we're trying to do is raise awareness amongst the churches. Would you mind if I used a bit of what you've said in that evening? But also going on from that, I'm a health professional. So do you think when I talk to people about depression or particularly asylum seekers and refugees, am I best to talk about lowering of mood or depression? I definitely don't use the word psychosis, but I might start off saying it's a discussion about your mental health. Is that wrong? Do we use depression more than mental? You know what I mean?
Oh, I do. And to your first question, yes, feel free to use whatever you think will be helpful to your group. And to your second question, you're better off to say depression or stress or use the symptoms in a way like, are you sleeping well? Start from there, building up to the word depression or stress, or even to mental health. Because when you do that, when you start right from the bottom with familiar words, that will then they understand you are talking, these familiar words are what you are referring to as mental health. Yeah.
Thank you, Last. We got somebody else who's got their hand up. Is that Menesia? Menesia, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for your talk, which is very insightful and very educational. I just wanted to applaud you on the work that you are doing, because for sure I'm a healthcare professional and I've seen, yes, that some tools really do not align very well with the experience of worry and anxiety around this subject on a personal level, on people going through immigration issues, or just generally, this kind of concern that is not actually mental illness in itself. But what I just wanted to ask, out of the information that you've already provided, which is very helpful, to not to recognize distress as a mental illness, how do you think, out of your experience and listening to migrants, how can faith communities pick up without actually dismissing someone's fear or uncertainty? This the kind of language that feels supportive when someone is waiting for things like, for example, home office decisions. And if you're going to move away from, say, for example, you've prayed, and if they come back again with the same situation, you're actually saying, oh, what is your faith like? What alternative language examples would you give to help unlearn for some, within the faith community, to unlearn the wrong expressions?
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you for your kind remarks. And I think that's a very thoughtful question. What I would think, because individuals are different, people take things differently. So obviously what you will need to do is to see how the rapport between you and the people you are communicating with. What language do you think works best for them? But all I know is listening well is a form of justice and love. And like I said, you don't have to fix people, or you don't have to say anything. In mental health, you don't have to say anything, but you have to listen more. If someone comes to you about their home office issue, it depends. Normally, when someone is coming to you about home office challenges, they may be talking to you about homelessness. They may be talking to you about the e-visa. They may be talking to you about now they need to resubmit and they need A, B, C, D. And I think the best way to respond to them is along the lines of the challenges they are facing. And I don't know if I'm clear in whether I got your question correct, where you are saying, how do I respond? Then it depends on how they pitch their question to you. But mostly I know for people going through, people under immigration control, they more like talk about their challenges. Or maybe they are saying, oh, my home office issue keeps going on and on. I'm still waiting for a response. Then just ask, how long is it taking nowadays for them to feedback, for you to get a response? How long does it take? Talk about how long it takes. You also do not know, but so you can't say, oh, just trust in the process. Oh, trust in the process. You're safe here. I think your response has to be towards what question is it? Is it about, oh, I've exhausted my Section 4 and now I'm homeless? If it is like that, then you're asking, do you know of any organizations that supports migrants that can help you with accommodation? And if you know, you give them a few names to check, or even to say Citizens Advice, because I know Citizens Advice is nationwide. So maybe if you don't, have you tried Citizens Advice? They may signpost you to some organizations and stuff like that. That's practical answers, I think.
Thank you, Last. I hope, Manesia, that sort of answers your question. And I'm sensing from the nods that I saw on the screen when Manesia was asking that, I think that is something within the church that we'd like to be directed in any shape, way, or form when we interface with somebody who has an issue. And what I'm understanding for it, if you can nod if I'm saying it correct, Last, is I think speak on the issue that they've brought at hand, and not necessarily trying to understand and diagnose as we tend to, and give solutions. I think if the issue is that I am stressed because I'm now developing impatience and frustration, I think it's to deal with that symptom, which is the impatience and frustration, and how best you can curb that, or be in there for that frustration and waiting period. Can we invite you to this? Can we, and try to sort of divert their attention from the wait? Because there's nothing we can do about the wait. There's nothing we can do about diagnosing, unless you're a medical professional, in which case you have to be the certified doctor for you to diagnose. But I think it's filling in the gaps for in whatever shape, way, or form. So somebody who comes in, I think the understanding is that somebody who comes into a church and they are showing signs of strain or stress, which are then what you call loosely depression and what we then tend to call depression, or which can go into psychosis, I think is being there, which is possibly part of listening, if I'm correct, part of listening and closing the gap.
Yeah.
Any other? Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, Manesi.
Sorry, go ahead, last.
I was actually going to say, yeah, I think also what I don't want is for people to fear approaching those that are coming into church. When you know someone who is coming to church, who you know they're struggling, that they are on their asylum process, not to just ignore them to say we can't talk about this, because sometimes people don't want to come forward and keep coming to you to talk about their problems. It also is okay. Are you okay? Is there anything we can do to help? And are you okay is enough. Is there anything we can do to help? Then you listen if they need any help, what sort of help they need, and if you are able to signpost, if you are able to deal with it, and so be it. But don't go straight with your question. Oh, so how far is your application? Have you received anything from the Home Office? What are they saying? That kind of thing. People in the end, they tend to not come to church. We had at Inini, this guy, he's been having problems with his mental health, where he gets detained in mental hospital and then comes back. So each time he would come back, the group will keep asking him, so are you okay? So now he doesn't come anymore. So people tend to then stop coming to church, whereas the church probably is where they were getting their respite. Yeah, and you don't want that to happen.
I've noted down. Yeah.
It's not so much a question. Is people with mental health issues are not treated equally. If you have a physical illness, everyone's fine, they ask and whatever, and you can possibly visibly see it. But people's attitudes change towards you and they speak to you differently. My partner has bipolar, or my previous partner. She was a nurse, an excellent nurse. But when she'd have an episode and we went into the hospital, even the nurses would treat her differently. And when I was off for 3 months with heart issues, I got a letter from Synod saying, we're sorry you're off with depression. I've never had that. It must be terrible. And I was aghast at being thought I had a mental illness. So I had my unconscious bias there. So it's seeing people with mental health issues and not talking to them differently. It's normalising in the sense that it is an illness. And sadly, within the health service, money for the mental health services is much lower. So you can't find a psychiatrist, a psychologist, anything for years. And so it's being, for me, equalised and not stigmatising. As what you said, Alison, people are stigmatised if you have a mental health issue. So it's not a question, sorry to last, but really to ask everyone to, if you have someone you know or within church, is not to talk down to them, basically. They're there, dear. It's not. Okay.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you.
Oh, that's it. Now me done.
We've got a comment from Maggie. Maggie says her apologies, her camera is not working. We won't judge you, Maggie, for your camera. But she's put in a comment and it says, it is important not to try to fix people or make them a church project. And I think in trying to assist, what we tend to do is push forward the people who are experiencing the issue that we're dealing with, or people who have experienced a breakdown, to say, well, you've had a breakdown, you can come through and you are able to speak on it. I think you suddenly then become a church project. Am I correct, Lust, in that you're now being put in the limelight as if you're a subject specialist because you've experienced something?
Yeah, that's a fair comment, and I think we've seen it happening quite often. And I've seen some literature on clinical psychologists, because, like I mentioned, that Black people are overrepresented in experiencing mental illness. The paper that I'm talking about was talking about when then a Black person needs support from a clinical psychologist, it then is that one Black clinical psychologist who is always being pushed forward to, oh, you are a Black person, you can deal with this Black person. And the literature was, the piece of literature was about, I am just as good as you. I don't necessarily am an expert in being Black. So this is exactly the same as, I'm not an expert in having a mental breakdown. I had my, and mental breakdowns are different. Maybe mine was different from what this one is going through. It doesn't necessarily mean that I am best placed to deal with this issue. And that's putting a burden on somebody. And sometimes they can't say no because they feel bad for saying no. Yeah, I think you are right. We shouldn't overburden others because they've had a similar experience with the experience that needs dealing with at the moment.
Well, thank you very much, Lust. Thank you we could have gone on and spoken. I'm sure there are lots more things that we would have thought about on mental health. There's lots to unpack. I think it's a very big topic, and to compress it in 1 hour was very difficult. There's a lot more that we haven't spoken about. We're not shutting the door on discussion on mental health within Methodist Women in Britain. But what we're doing is allowing that you can start those discussions where you are. When you replay this particular video, you're able to then open what affects you in your particular area and how you can deal with it. But it's to ignite that point of discussion and that it is a topic that we can talk about. So thank you very much, Lust, for helping us to know that we can carry one another in whichever way, shape, or form, whatever our experience is, whatever our background is, whatever our problem is. We are our sister's keeper. And if this session raised things for you, please reach out to your GP, to someone who's a specialist or a trusted friend, to your church. If somebody has reached out to you, be compassionate, be listening. Remember, you are not the rain. You are the one walking through it. So thank you, ladies. Our next session, which is next month, and thank you, Lust, and we're hoping you'll be able to join us in that one as well. We've got a series that's going on until June. Our next session is on the 26th of February, and this will be on domestic abuse. We'll be joined by various groups, including a few survivors who will speak up on their experiences. And I think coming from a topic of mental health and knowing how to deal, or I don't want to use the word deal, how to be there for one another. I think we are all learning and being able to go out and discuss. So I'm hoping this is not the last time that you talk about this discussion. Please look at all our other webinar series. And from Leonora and myself and all at Methodist Women in Britain, may the peace of God be with you, and see you next time. Thank you.